Right, y'all. Welcome to Yin on this Thursday. We're going to start again tonight in a seated posture. So just telling you that so you can get yourself there. And Katie and Gita heard the precursor to this last night. We're still talking about the Yamas, the first limb of the 8-limb path of yoga. And I'm going to, week by week, stick with one yama, delving into that on Wednesday, and then delving a little further on Thursday, and then moving on to the next one the following week. So we are still talking about Satya tonight, which is truth and truthfulness. Truth and truthfulness. And just to give a little review or background, if you're not familiar with the Yamas and Niyamas, they're basically, I heard them described in something I was listening to as a non-religious version of the 10 Commandments, because there's 5 of each, so there's 10 of them. But they're these, the Yamas are considered moral restraints, or the way that we should interact with others as we conduct our lives and go through our lives. But we can also reflect those things, these teachings, back to ourselves as well. And then the Niyamas, which we'll get into in a few weeks' time, are more for how we go forward with our own behavior as it pertains to ourselves. So truthfulness and speaking the truth, speaking your truth. It can be taken in a straightforward manner or a more nuanced fashion. And so something that I was reading today that kind of builds on what I talked about yesterday is being very careful with your word or words. So in the speaking of the truth. And also, I really love how all of these teachings layer on top of each other, and they don't exist in separate silos. They all tie back into each other. So something in this article that I read about Satya said that, and going back to ahimsa, which we talked about last week, which is non-harming, non-violence, that's sort of the underlying base for everything. You can also think of it like first, do no harm. So everything leads back to this doing of no harm. So being careful with our words when we're speaking the truth. What this article gave the example of, you might be wearing the ugliest dress I've ever seen, but to tell you that, to speak something that might be true, factual, but is harmful, is not necessarily living your Satya. So very clear-cut example that I think illustrates it pretty well. So we can, of course, see how we can apply that to others and our interactions with others to live harmoniously as human beings, but then also watching how we speak to ourselves. And as we're living our truth and being authentic with ourselves, how are we talking to ourselves? How is that inner dialogue going? Both when you're on the yoga mat and when you are not. So let's let that all kind of download and digest as we come to the mat here. And those of you on camera, I see that you're already there, but we can start to close the eyes down if that feels comfortable. Find a little bit of lightness in your upper body as you find groundedness in your sitting bones, your legs, everything that's touching the mat. Starting to notice your breath. Starting to breathe in this concept of living in truth. What that means to you. Our intention from last night's practice was listening intently as that pathway to a truthful and honest existence and way of being. So you can take that in tonight if that resonated last night, or if you weren't here last night and that sparks something, or if there is another intention or mantra you'd like to bring into your practice, just incorporating that, envisioning it in your mind right now. As you start to listen and become aware and bring yourself fully into this place on your mat. Your breath might have slowed down somewhat, found additional depth and length. Some days it takes a little longer to get there, so just acknowledging where you're at and focusing on your inhales and exhales, just a few rounds more in this first space. And perhaps this next round of breath, you draw in through your nose, clearing out through your mouth with a big sigh. And either with the eyes still closed down, resuming your natural deepened breath, just come into a little gentle movement. Slowly awakening from this opening posture and switching the cross of your legs, taking a little twist, anything that's needed here. Once you're ready, let's allow the legs to, you can straighten them completely if it Feels good after that longer held seat. And then we'll plant the feet on the mat with knees bent about hip width distance apart and come through a few rounds of seated cat and cow. So lifting the heart, lifting the gaze, the chin, breathing in, and exhale, hanging on to your legs, rounding back, really pulling some space here, finding a nice curve through the spine, tucking the chin and the pelvis, coming back up and over those sitting bones, lifting. Exhale, releasing back. Couple rounds more, moving with your breath. Good, now let's finish up that last round that you're on, and we'll find a nice tall spine here with legs lengthened out. And of course you might opt to sit on top of the edge of a blanket just for a little lift in the hips. That can help if the hamstrings, the low back are tight. And maybe a block, a cushion, pillow, something in front of you as we get ready to fold. So setting up for our caterpillar, which is our yin speak for a seated forward fold. We'll lift the arms up with a breath in when you're ready. And exhale, rounding forward. Letting the hands just rest next to your legs, wherever they reach. Remembering it's of no consequence how far forward you're folded, if your hands reach your feet or not. Letting go of those aesthetic goals that might be swirling around in your mind, and softening into the pose. Keeping a gentle little micro bend to the knees, or it could be a deeper bend if that helps you to access some space in the pose. Adjusting as you need, as you get settled in here, eventually finding that stillness along with your breath.
notice now that we're a little further into our hold, where there might be tension harbored, where you could potentially send a little extra space using your breath, softening, just noticing. Last stretch of our hold. And let your breath deepen. If you're feeling the challenge, take a final breath or two where you are. Let yourself prepare for coming out mentally. And as you're ready, just pressing the palms into the floor to manually lift yourself up here. Feeling everything release as you let go of the pose, that rebound effect, and then slowly coming into some gentle movement. Your knees might bend, you might take some windshield wipes, leaning back on the hands to release those hip flexors. I really felt that forward fold deeply in the abdomen tonight. So if you are with me on that, you can lift into a reverse table here, lengthening out, or even in a reverse plank. Anything you need here is all good. And once you've had sufficient release, we'll ease down onto the back for our next pose, coming down. And you might take a full body stretch. Never projecting my own experience onto your practice, but sometimes I think it's helpful to know that as yoga teachers, we experience discomfort too in this practice. So it really got into my abdominal wall in a very unique way. So once you're ready, hug those knees into the chest and let's rock side to side for the low back, and opening the door here for the hips. So if you want to circle, bringing the knees as one piece, one direction and the other, or letting them separate and then come back together. And from here, we're going to find a happy baby pose. So you might remain on your mat here and reach either for big toes or edges of the feet or your ankles. You can also, I realize you might not be as conveniently next to a wall as I am here. But you can take this pose up against the wall with your knees bent and feet angling out, and just really let the hips open up. And this version of our happy baby with the low back nice and grounded, it's almost like a wall version of frog pose as well. And I really like this for yin because we don't have to actively hold the feet. But like I said, if you are not near a surface that you can set this up, then you are welcome to just stay right where you are and hang on to your feet. If you are hanging onto your feet, just notice if you can release a little bit of your grip and still achieve the same result in that posture. And once you can manage to release that grip, see where else you might be holding. Muscles of the jaw, forehead, maybe the shoulders, maybe your legs themselves. Just see where you can let go of engagement and soften. This won't be as long of a hold. Keeping in mind, my friends, that may not be up against a wall. So we're getting into the last minute here. And whichever version you're in, if you want to start to invite in some movement, if you're at the wall, you can even go for a more traditional grabbing those feet and starting that rocking side to side that most of us that we love in this happy baby pose. Once you're ready to let it go, just bringing the knees back in together, hugging them in. I'm gonna make my way back over to my mat here. And let's pause here, just creating some compression, shins hugging in. You can even encircle one of your wrists with your opposite hand and really hug those knees in. We can look at this as a reclined child's pose. Let the shoulders soften, let the low back be in contact with the mat. You are hanging on to your forearm, your wrist, just go ahead and switch sides. You might find a little bit more heaviness in your tailbone, your sacrum. Even think of your sit bones pulling toward the top of your mat, getting a little additional stretch in the hips. This is a nice release after a happy baby, but it's also a stretch in and of itself. A few breaths more. Good, then release your compression. You can leave the knees bent or maybe straighten the legs up toward the ceiling, just letting the blood, the fluid rush back into the joints. Letting it go. And once you're ready, we'll find a rocking motion north and south. You can come up just once or take a few rocks. Whatever feels good on your spine. And we'll make our way to hands and knees to our tabletop position. I'm going to recommend blocks or something. If you have two of something, all the better, just to have on either side of your mat here. And I've set my blanket under my knees. In the absence of a blanket or towel, you can also double your mat if it helps make your knees a little more cozy here. And then a few breaths here for some movement, some cat and cow. Maybe some hip sways side to side. And we'll meet in a neutral table. Once you're ready, we'll step the right foot up between your hands, setting up a low lunge, known as dragon pose in our yin practice. And this is where these blocks, or maybe your favorite Tolstoy novels was the first really thick book that came to mind. Something under your hands just to give you some lift here. And then making sure this right knee is stacked right over the ankle. And then letting the hips come down into the sensation. Just feeling where you're at. This will ramp up the sensation for most of us a little more than the last two hip opening shapes that we took. So ease in, listening to your body. So a few things we can do, not necessarily that we have to do. You can come to the inside of your right foot with both hands or blocks. So widening that right foot toward the edge of your mat. And from there, we have the option of coming a little lower with our hands, our elbows, our upper body. And another thing you can explore, if you don't have any sciatic nerve issues now or previously, I would just caution against this. You can start to open this right knee up a bit, rolling onto the knife edge of the right foot. So it changes the stretch a little bit, but again, that can aggravate some sciatica if you deal with that. So keeping that neutral alignment is always an option. Part of our practice of Satya of being truthful as it pertains to our physical practice is being honest with ourselves about where we're at each and every time that we're on the mat. It sounds pretty simple, but there are times that whether it's ego or our expectation of ourselves, or just, we get really tied to, I always do this pose this way. Whether that's a modification or taking something more advanced. And we're always a little bit different every time we step on the mat. So keeping that honesty, moving in kindness each and every time. Take a few breaths more here in our dragon pose on the right. And giving yourself that little heads up that we're about to release. Just keeping our nervous system from getting too big of a jolt, and slowly easing out, coming up. If you came down to elbows and easing out of the hips, maybe through a brief seated half splits here, lengthening out that right leg. I'm not going too far out of this just yet, but take what you need. That's a really deep hip stretch. So we'll come back for this lunge. I'm going to start to walk my right foot over toward the left edge of the mat, setting my shin down, coming into our pigeon pose, or swan, as we call it in the yin practice. You might, if you're looking at the screen, you don't have to, you can just listen to my words, but my shin in yin, my top shin is not angling as far toward the top of the mat. When we do this practice, our body is normally not heated up. We're supposed to practice again with cold muscles, so it looks different than pigeon at the end of a vinyasa practice. So that placement of the shin can be one way that it's different. So just don't, if you feel like I need to get that parallel shin, can let that go a little bit, particularly if it causes some stress, undue stress in the knee joint. If there's a lot of space under this right hip, you can pad it with a prop here. And if and when you're ready to come down with the chest into sleeping swan, you can use blocks for your forehead, for your chest, just relaxing down, softening in. Try to find ease through your shoulders. Notice if your hands are tense. The muscles of the face are always a biggie. The jaw and brow always tend to hold. Some gripping when we're tense. And of course, if there's any pain in the knees in this posture, you can always take this onto your back for a figure 4 stretch. Another lesser given option is to bend that back leg in to make more of a deer Z shape with the legs. So you can explore it and see what works for you. If this traditional shape is at all painful or unduly challenging in the body. Few breaths more. And add to your pace. Start to rise. We'll make our exit. We like to ease down on the hip. I've been opening and then ease into either downward dog or tabletop, 3-legged version, circling out that leg. Just getting that leg behind you should probably feel pretty good. All that rush, this feeling coming back in. You're always welcome to continue taking more movement as you need it. Just honor that. And we'll set up our second side with dragon. When you are ready, stepping forward with the left, scooting the right knee back. Just making sure that stacking of the joints rather, is occurring. Keeping that knee joint happy. It also correlates to our hip joint when we kind of gravitate toward one direction or the other, or when we pull that knee past the ankle and create that stress. We are stressing the joints in this practice, but doing so in alignment is always a good idea. So you can come to the inside if you wish, knowing that your second side. Side won't necessarily mirror the first side, so Another thing we can let go of, that notion that it has to be identical from one side to the other. I know I've shared this before, but in pigeon, I've gone through periods of time where my left knee is really not happy in an upright pigeon or swan. So I've taken that one way on my right side and another way on the left. Completely different look of the pose, but accessing the same stretch in an appropriate way from one side to the other. That's sometimes hard for the brain to wrap around, though. We want to feel like that's somehow going to damage our practice in some way or set things off balance, when really it can create the opposite. It can lead things into that place of balance, meeting yourself where you're at. Just a little bit more here. Taking another nice big full breath. And starting to rewind back. Again, you can take that brief or maybe not so brief half splits here as long as you need it before we come into that left side of our swan. And walking it over, or coming onto your back. And those ego moments, those times when we need to change something or make a pose look like we're not accustomed to, that's sometimes when that self-talk can get a little come out of our ahimsa and our satya, where we're not speaking as kindly to ourselves internally. If we do that on the mat, I guarantee we're doing it off of the mat as well. Settling in with what's going on here on your left side. Sending breath into tightness, into those gripping places. I think oftentimes on our yoga mat and in life in general, we feel like if we take a step back, if we modify something, if we operate from that place of kindness that we need in the moment, sometimes we feel like we're going to undo our growth and undo progress. And that's simply not the case. We have to break out of that pattern of thinking. I mean, that sometimes taking that pause, taking that step back will create more of a balance to where we grow more. We're seeing that so much in many facets of the world around us right now. Last little stretch here of our hold. Take another nice full breath. Start to slowly ease your way out. Maybe coming onto that left hip and moving to your hands and your knees, to your downward dog. Nice little gentle, slow walking of the dog can feel pretty glorious after all that hip work. And then let's, if you're with me here in downward dog, you can walk your hands back to your feet here. Let's make sure that the feet are at least hip width, if not a little bit further apart. If you were on your hands and knees, you can just make your way into the standing forward fold. This will be another shorter hold, but if it would help your body, you are welcome to do a couple of things with props. A pillow or blanket can be a really nice little cushion between the rib cage and the thighs, and perhaps blocks underneath the ragdoll arms, just to offer some support to the upper body. But as I mentioned, we won't be here more than a couple of minutes, so if you think you can sustain it, you can always change your mind and grab a prop as needed. Just letting your upper body really drop in here. Ragdoll arms are not required. Hands can be down on the mat if that feels more grounding. Just try to really let the chin come toward that notch in your throat to make sure the back of the neck is free of any tension. Big breaths here. In the end, we call this dangle pose. Yoga can be really literal like that sometimes, so let yourself really hang heavy here. Couple breaths more. And as you get ready to release, if you have that blanket or pillow in your hip crease, let it drop to the ground and roll your spine vertebrae by vertebrae, coming up. I always have my camera angled down for this practice since it's mostly mat work, so my head is cut off right now, but hopefully you're not watching me too much anyway. We can just enjoy this upright sensation. Give your shoulders a few rolls. If it feels good, maybe twist side to side. You can pick up your feet if they're feeling a little heavy. And then we'll take it back down to the mat. As far as official yin postures, that's our only standing pose. Hadn't done it in quite a while with y'all. So let's come all the way to the mat here. Hug those knees in. And give you a little space here if you would like to take a little spinal twist to each side. Or if there's something else that you would like, another back bend perhaps, or a back bend I should say. We did not do much of that tonight. So there's a bridge pose. Maybe a supported fish. So letting yourself complete your practice. If there's something that I did not give you, and then on that note of back bending, it will also give you the option here to roll your blanket, your towel, or take a pillow or blocks behind your spine to create a nice gentle heart opening for your Shavasana. So this burrito rolled blanket is really my favorite way to really gently end the practice with a back bend. It doesn't take a lot of effort, not a lot of sensation, but there is a really beautiful opening here through the chest. Let yourself settle there in your time. And as you arrive in your final posture, give the body a quick scan for any remaining holding, tension, grip. Perhaps taking a clearing breath in through your nose. Releasing your control of breath with a sigh out. And resting here in complete ease, in your truth, in your knowledge that your practice was exactly as it was intended.
Only when you are ready, allow yourself to move back into awareness and a little greater depth of breath. Taking a couple full rounds. And starting to move your fingers, your toes. Taking anything you need as far as movement and stretch on your way up to a seated position. Taking your time. And once you reach that place, we'll draw the hands into heart center, pressing the palms together, connecting the thumbs to our heart. And we'll take another unified breath together, drawing it in through the nose. Deep, gratifying sigh out through the mouth. Thank you so much for sharing your light, your truth, your practice with me tonight. It is my honor to guide you. Have a wonderful remainder of your week. Until we meet on the mat again, namaste. Thank you all so much.